The wind howled across the Montana plains like a living thing, carrying snow that stung my face and blurred the world into endless white. I pulled my coat tighter and guided my horse toward the barn, ready to call it a night. Christmas Eve on a ranch meant double-checking the livestock, making sure every animal had sheltered from the storm rolling in from the north. The thermometer had dropped 20 degrees since sunset, and the forecast promised it would only get worse. I'd been working the Double R Ranch for 3 years now. Ever since I turned 21 and decided city life wasn't for me. My name's Caleb Morrison, and I traded a cramped apartment in Billings for endless sky, honest work, and the kind of solitude that lets a man think. Or maybe not think, depending on what he's running from. The ranch owner, Robert Richardson, treated me like family, and his wife May made sure I never missed a home-cooked meal. It was a good life, simple and clean. As I approached the barn, something caught my attention. A sound that didn't belong to the wind or the animals. I dismounted, my boots crunching in the fresh snow, and tied my horse to the post. The sound came again, clearer this time. Someone was crying. Not the quiet sniffles of someone with a cold, but the raw, broken sobs of someone whose world had just collapsed. My heart clenched, and I moved quickly around the side of the barn. That's where I found him. A young man, maybe 18 or 19, huddled against the barn wall with his knees pulled to his chest. He wore nothing but a thin jacket, jeans, and sneakers, completely wrong for this weather. His dark hair was dusted with snow, and even in the dim light from the barn windows I could see him shaking. Not just from the cold, though that was bad enough. This was the kind of shaking that came from somewhere deeper. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. "You okay?" It was a stupid question. Clearly he wasn't okay. But I didn't know what else to say. He looked up at me with eyes so full of pain and fear that I actually took a step back. Those eyes were dark, almost black in the shadows, with long lashes currently clumped with tears and melting snow. His face was beautiful in that devastating way that makes your chest ache. All sharp cheekbones and soft lips that trembled as he tried to form words. "I'm sorry," he finally managed, his voice hoarse and breaking. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'll go. I just needed a minute." He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He stumbled, and I caught him instinctively, feeling how cold his skin was even through his jacket. The kid was hypothermic, or close to it. Out here, on a night like this, that could kill him within hours. Maybe less. "You're not going anywhere," I said firmly. "Can you walk?" He nodded, but when he tried to take a step, his legs buckled again. Without thinking twice, I scooped him up. He weighed less than a newborn calf, all lean muscle and bone with nothing extra. He went rigid in my arms, his breath catching, and I felt his whole body tense like he expected me to hurt him. That reaction told me more than words could. Someone had hurt this kid, and recently I carried him into the barn. Grateful for the warmth from the animals and the space heaters we kept running. The horses nickered softly as we passed, and I headed straight for the tack room where I kept an emergency kit, extra blankets, and a small electric heater. I set him down gently on an old couch we'd salvaged years ago, and he immediately tried to curl into himself again, defensive, protective, like if he made himself small enough. The world couldn't hurt him anymore. "I'm Caleb," I said, grabbing blankets from the storage chest. "What's your name?" He hesitated, watching me with those wounded eyes, trying to decide if I was safe. I kept my movements slow and predictable, wrapping a heavy wool blanket around his shoulders. He clutched it with white-knuckled hands, and I noticed his fingers were red and swollen from the cold. Frostbite was a real possibility if we didn't warm him up properly. "Tyler," he whispered finally. "Tyler Bennett." His accent suggested he wasn't from around here, more city than country. with careful pronunciation that spoke of good schools and better circumstances than whatever had landed him. Behind my barn on Christmas Eve, I nodded and turned up the heater, then filled the electric kettle I kept for making coffee during long winter nights. Hot liquids would help raise his core temperature faster than anything else. "Tyler, I need to know if you're hurt," I said, keeping my voice level and calm. "Did someone hurt you? Are you running from someone?" His face crumpled, and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. He shook his head violently, but the gesture was more about denial than answering my question. I'd seen plenty of wounded animals in my time, and I recognized the signs. Whatever had happened, it had been bad enough to send him running into a blizzard with no proper clothing or plan. "My parents," he finally choked out. "They found out. About me, about—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I understood. I'd always understood, even if I'd spent years trying not to. Out here in ranch country where men were supposed to be a certain way, love a certain way, some truths stayed buried. I'd buried mine so deep I sometimes forgot they existed. But looking at this broken kid, I remembered everything I'd tried to forget. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay, you're safe here, Tyler. No one's going to hurt you tonight." The kettle clicked off, and I made him a cup of strong, sweet tea, pressing it into his cold hands. He took it automatically, his fingers wrapping around the warmth like a lifeline. He sipped carefully, and some color started returning to his face. We sat in silence for a long moment. The only sounds of the storm outside and the peaceful noises of the animals settling in for the night. Tyler fell asleep on that old couch around midnight, exhausted from crying and the cold. I stayed with him, keeping the heater running and piling on more blankets when he shivered. I'd sent a quick text to May, letting her know I was staying in the barn to monitor a situation, which was vague enough that she wouldn't worry, but clear enough that she'd know not to expect me for breakfast. Around 3 in the morning, I dozed off in the chair beside him, waking every hour to check that he was still breathing steady. When dawn broke on Christmas morning, pale light filtered through the barn windows, turning everything soft and gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Tyler stirred, his eyes opening slowly, confusion crossing his face before memory caught up and his expression crumpled. He sat up quickly, the blankets falling away, and looked around like a trapped animal seeking escape. I raised my hands in a calming gesture, showing I wasn't a threat. "Morning," I said softly. "How are you feeling?" He touched his face experimentally, wincing at what were probably puffy eyes and chapped lips. His hair stuck up in every direction, and in the morning light I could see details I'd missed in the darkness. A small scar through his left eyebrow. The way his ears stuck out just slightly, which should have looked awkward, but somehow made him more endearing. The delicate line of his throat above the collar of his jacket. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, and I noticed he said that a lot. Apologizing for existing, for needing help, for being found. "I should go. Thank you for," he gestured vaguely at the blankets, the tea, the space. "For not calling the cops or whatever." Stood up, swaying slightly, and I stood too, blocking the door without making it obvious. Outside, the temperature had to be well below 0, and he still didn't have proper winter gear. "It's Christmas," I pointed out. "Where exactly are you planning to go?" He blinked at me, clearly not having thought that far ahead. His shoulders slumped in defeat, and he looked so young and lost that something in my chest twisted painfully. I made a decision that probably wasn't smart, but felt necessary. "Come up to the house. May's probably got breakfast ready, and we can figure out what to do next when you've got a hot meal in you and some decent clothes." Tyler opened his mouth to protest, but his stomach growled loudly, betraying him. A faint blush crept across his cheeks, the first color I'd seen in his face that wasn't from cold or crying. It was ... cute. I pushed that thought away immediately. This kid needed help. It's not complicated feelings from a 24-year-old cowboy who'd spent years pretending he didn't notice how other men looked in tight jeans. Focus on helping him, I told myself sternly. Nothing else? We made our way through the snow to the main house, me lending him a coat and proper boots that were too big but better than nothing. May must have been watching from the kitchen window because the door opened before we reached the porch. She took one look at Tyler and her maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. Within minutes, he was seated at the kitchen table with a plate piled high with eggs, bacon, pancakes, and hash browns, while she fussed over him like a mother hen. Robert came in from checking the livestock, stomping snow off his boots and removing his hat. He was a big man, weathered and tough from decades of ranch work. But he had kind eyes that saw more than most people gave him credit for. He looked at Tyler, then at me, and I saw understanding pass across his face. He didn't ask questions, just sat down and started eating his own breakfast, making small talk about the storm and the animals that eased the tension in Tyler's shoulders. Over breakfast, Tyler's story came out in pieces. His parents had found messages on his phone. There'd been a confrontation. Words like abomination and disgusting and not our son anymore had been thrown around. They'd given him an ultimatum: conversion therapy or get out. He'd chosen to get out, grabbing what cash he had and hitchhiking as far as he could before the storm forced him to seek shelter. He'd been planning to walk to the next town, not realizing it was 15 miles away with nothing but empty land in between. May's face grew, progressively more horrified as he spoke, and she kept getting up to bring him more food, more juice, more anything she could think of. Robert's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet, letting Tyler talk. When the story wound down, Tyler stared at his plate, clearly expecting judgment or maybe pity. What he got instead was May reaching across the table to squeeze his hand gently. "You're staying here through the holiday," she said in a tone that brooked no argument. "We'll figure out the rest after that." Tyler's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different. Not the broken sobs from last night, but the quiet tears of someone who'd expected the worst and received kindness instead. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and May bustled off to prepare the guest room. Robert caught my eye and jerked his head toward the door. I followed him out to the porch, where we stood looking at the snow-covered fields sparkling in the morning sun. "Good kid, Robert," said finally. "Brave to run like that." I nodded, not sure what to say. Robert was quiet for a long moment, then added, "May and we're not blind, Caleb, and we don't judge. Everyone deserves to be themselves and be safe doing it." My throat tightened at the unexpected acceptance in his words. He clapped me on the shoulder once, firm and reassuring, then headed back inside, leaving me alone with thoughts I'd tried to avoid for years. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange, suspended kind of way. Tyler settled into the guest room, and May made sure he had everything he needed, including winter clothes that actually fit from a shopping trip into town. He was quiet at first, jumpy and apologetic, but gradually the fear in his eyes dimmed and something else emerged. A sharp sense of humor, intelligence that showed in his questions about the ranch, and a smile that transformed his entire face when something genuinely amused him. I found myself spending more time around the house than usual, telling myself I was just making sure Tyler was okay. But if I was honest, I was drawn to him in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. We'd sit in the living room after dinner, him reading or scrolling through his phone while I pretended to focus on ranch accounts. I'd catch myself watching the way lamplight caught in his hair, or how he'd bite his lower lip when concentrating, or the graceful movement of his hands when he gestured while talking. 3 days after Christmas, I found him in the barn. He'd wandered out after breakfast, drawn by curiosity about the horses. I'd been meaning to exercise Dancer, my favorite mare, and I found Tyler standing outside her stall, watching her with fascination. She'd approached the gate, snuffling at his extended hand, and Tyler was smiling. Really smiling? Not the polite expression he gave May and Robert, but something genuine and unguarded that made my heart stutter. "She's beautiful," he said when he noticed me. "I've never been this close to a horse before." There was wonder in his voice, childlike and pure. I opened the stall and led Dancer out, showing Tyler how to approach her properly, where to pet her, how to read her body language. He learned quickly, his movements becoming more confident as Dancer responded to his gentle touch. Watching him discover this new world, I felt something shift inside me. Something dangerous and wonderful. "Want to ride?" I offered impulsively. His eyes went wide. "I've never ridden a horse," he admitted. "I'd probably fall off." I grinned at his nervousness. "Not if you're riding with me." The words came out more suggestive than I'd intended, and we both froze for a second, awareness crackling between us. Tyler's cheeks flushed, and he looked away, but not before I saw interest flicker in those dark eyes. Interest and uncertainty and something that looked like longing. I saddled Dancer and mounted first, then extended my hand down to Tyler. He hesitated only a moment before taking it, and I pulled him up behind me. He settled against my back awkwardly at first, not sure where to put his hands, until I guided them to my waist. "Hold on," I said, my voice rougher than usual. I felt him grip my coat. His body pressed close enough that I could feel his heartbeat against my spine. It was too fast, matching my own racing pulse. We rode out into the snowy fields, Dancer moving at an easy walk. Tyler tensed at first, but gradually relaxed, his grip becoming more confident. He started asking questions about the ranch, about the land, about my life here. I found myself telling him things I'd never told anyone. About why I'd left the city, about the peace I'd found in this work. About the stars on clear winter nights that made you feel both insignificant and infinite at once. "It sounds lonely," Tyler said quietly. His breath was warm against my neck, sending shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I considered his words carefully. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it's the kind of loneliness I chose. That's different from the kind that's forced on you." He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I've been lonely my whole life, even surrounded by people. Maybe especially then. Is that weird?" "No," I said simply. "I understand that." I did it. We rode in comfortable silence after that, and I became hyper-aware of every point where his body touched mine. His thighs against mine, his chest against my back, his arms around my waist. It felt natural and right, in a way nothing else ever had. When we finally returned to the barn, I was almost disappointed. I helped him dismount, and our hands lingered together longer than necessary, neither of us quite willing to break the contact. That night, I lay in my small cabin, unable to sleep, thinking about the weight of Tyler against my back, and the way he'd laughed when Dancer had tossed her head playfully. I thought about the life I'd built here, safe and solitary and carefully controlled. And I thought about how Tyler was disrupting all of that without even trying. He made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need: connection, understanding, someone who saw all of me and didn't look away. New Year's Eve arrived with clear skies and brutal cold. May had invited a few neighboring ranch families over for dinner and cards, and the house filled with warmth and laughter. Tyler had grown more comfortable around May and Robert, but the arrival of strangers made him retreat into himself again. He stayed quiet during dinner, answering questions politely, but not volunteering much. I watched him pick at his food and recognized the look of someone trying to be invisible. After dinner, all the adults settled in for cards and drinks. I caught Tyler's eye and tilted my head toward the door. He followed me out to the porch, where we stood watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The cold bit through our coats, but neither of us suggested going back inside. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged, that non-committal gesture that meant everything and nothing. "Just tired of being the charity case," he said finally. "Everyone's been so nice, but I can't stay here forever." "What do you want to do?" I asked. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I have some money saved, enough for maybe a month's rent somewhere. But I have no job, no references, no high school diploma, because I was supposed to graduate in June. My parents were going to pay for college, but," he laughed bitterly, "that's obviously not happening now." "You could stay," I said impulsively. "The ranch always needs help, especially in spring during calving season. Robert pays fair wages, and there's housing. The cabin I live in has a second bedroom that's just storage right now." The words tumbled out before I could stop them, and Tyler turned to look at me with surprise. "You'd be okay with that? Sharing your space?" His tone suggested he knew exactly why I might not be okay with it. Why having him close every single day might be complicated, I said, meeting his eyes despite the risk. "I'd be okay with that." The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with everything we weren't saying. Tyler took a small step closer, close enough that I could see the individual snowflakes caught in his hair, the rapid pulse in his throat, the way his lips parted slightly as his breath quickened. My own breathing stuttered, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing if I could fly. "Caleb," he said softly, and the way he said my name made my chest ache. "I don't want to make things complicated for you. You've been so kind, and I don't want to ruin that." I understood what he was really saying. He was giving me an out, a chance to step back before this became something neither of us could take back. But I found I didn't want an out. I wanted to step forward, to close the distance between us, to find out if his lips were as soft as they looked. I started, but before I could finish, the door burst open and May called out that they were about to start a new card game. The moment shattered like glass, and Tyler stepped back quickly, creating safe distance between us. We went back inside, but I felt his absence like a phantom limb. Throughout the evening, I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, and every accidental brush of our hands sent electricity racing through my veins. Midnight approached, and everyone gathered in the living room for the countdown. May distributed champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Tyler. The television showed the ball, dropping in Times Square, thousands of miles and a whole world away from this Montana ranch. Everyone counted down together, and when midnight struck, there were hugs and cheers and well wishes. I found myself standing next to Tyler, and without thinking, I pulled him into a hug. He fit against me perfectly, his head tucking just under my chin, his arms wrapping around my waist. We held each other a moment too long for it to be casual or friendly. When we pulled apart, his eyes searched mine, asking questions I wasn't sure how to answer. Around us, people were laughing and making toasts, but it felt like we were in a bubble separate from everything else. "Happy New Year, Tyler," I said quietly. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Happy New Year, Caleb." The guests left shortly after, bundled up against the cold and heading home to their own ranches. May and Robert said their good nights and headed upstairs, leaving Tyler and me alone in the living room. We should have said good night, too, gone to our separate rooms, maintained the safe distance. Instead, we sat on the couch, closer than necessary, and talked. About everything. His dreams of being a writer. My complicated relationship with my own family. The way both of us had felt different our whole lives without understanding why until we did. "I knew I was gay when I was 14, Tyler said, staring at his hands. "I tried so hard to change it, to pray it away, to be what my parents wanted. But you can't change who you are. You can only break yourself trying." His voice cracked on the last words, and without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. He looked up at me, surprised, and his fingers intertwined with mine like they'd been designed to fit together. "I knew when I was 16, I admitted, feeling the words stick in my throat. "Never told anyone. Figured it was easier to just not deal with it. Found this place, buried myself in work, convinced myself I was fine alone." "Are you fine alone?" he asked. I looked at our joined hands, at his face turned up toward mine, at the vulnerability in his expression that matched what I was feeling. "I thought I was," I said honestly, "until you showed up behind my barn crying in the snow." Tyler moved into my cabin 3 days later. May had already discussed it with Robert. They'd agreed to hire Tyler for general ranch work with the understanding that he'd finish his GED online. The second bedroom was cleared out. A bed and furniture moved in, and suddenly my solitary space became shared. It should have been awkward to near strangers living in close quarters, but it wasn't. If anything, it felt natural, like pieces falling into place. We developed routines quickly. Tyler made coffee every morning while I started breakfast. We'd eat together, discussing the day's work ahead. He learned fast, never complaining about the hard physical labor or the long hours in the cold. He had a way with the animals, patient and gentle, that made even the most skittish calves trust him. I caught myself watching him more often than I should, admiring the way he moved. The concentration on his face when learning something new, the laugh that burst out of him when something delighted him. But with the closeness came complications. We were careful not to touch more than necessary, maintaining a careful physical distance even as we grew emotionally closer. Every evening we'd sit in the living room, him working on his GED coursework while I read or worked on ranch accounts. We'd talk late into the night, sharing stories and dreams and fears. I learned he loved poetry, especially Mary Oliver and Ocean Vuong. He learned I'd wanted to be a veterinarian before deciding I couldn't handle the idea of losing patients. 2 weeks into this new arrangement, everything shifted. I woke around 2 in the morning to the sound of crying. Tyler's nightmares had started a few days earlier, but this was different, more intense. I hesitated outside his door, unsure if I should intrude, but when I heard him call out in distress, I didn't think twice. I opened the door and found him tangled in his sheets, face wet with tears, clearly in the grip of a bad dream. "Tyler," I said softly, approaching the bed carefully. "Tyler, wake up. You're safe." His eyes flew open, wild and disoriented, and for a second he didn't recognize me. Then awareness returned, and he made a choked sound that might have been my name. Without asking permission, I sat on the edge of his bed and pulled him into a hug. He clung to me like I was the only solid thing in a tilting world, his whole body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," he gasped out between sobs. "I'm so sorry." I held him tighter, one hand in his hair, the other rubbing circles on his back. "Don't apologize. You're okay. You're safe here." He buried his face against my shoulder, and I felt his tears soaking through my t-shirt. We stayed like that for a long time, until his breathing evened out and the shaking subsided. When he finally pulled back, his face was blotchy and his eyes were red, but he looked more present than he had when he first woke. "I dreamed I was back there," he whispered, "in my house. My father was—" He said those things again, called me those names. His voice broke, and then I was back in the snow, and I couldn't find the barn. I was lost and freezing, and no one was coming. I cupped his face gently, making him look at me. "That's not real anymore. You're not lost. You're right here, and you're safe, and no one is going to hurt you." His eyes searched mine, looking for truth, for reassurance, for something I desperately wanted to give him. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please, just until I fall back asleep. It was a terrible idea. Dangerous, blurring lines that should stay clear. But I couldn't say no to the plea in his eyes. I lay down beside him, on top of the covers while he was under them, maintaining that thin barrier between us. He turned on his side to face me, and we lay there in the darkness, close enough to feel each other's warmth but not quite touching. His breathing gradually slowed, growing deeper and more even. Just as I thought he'd fallen asleep, he whispered, "Caleb, can I tell you something?" I murmured an affirmative, not trusting my voice. "I think about you all the time," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. "When I'm working, when I'm studying, when I'm trying to fall asleep. And I know I shouldn't because you've done so much for me already and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. But I can't help it. You make me feel safe and seen, and I've never felt like this before." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Tyler," I started, but I didn't know how to finish. What could I say? That I thought about him constantly too? That I'd started looking forward to coming home in a way I never had before? That sometimes when he smiled at me, I forgot how to breathe? All of that was true, but saying it out loud would change everything. And I was terrified of what that change might mean. "You don't have to say anything," Tyler continued, rushing now like he needed to get all the words out. "I just wanted you to know. Because keeping it inside was making me feel like I was lying, and you deserve honesty. You've only ever been honest with me." He closed his eyes, like he couldn't bear to see my reaction. I watched him in the darkness, this beautiful, brave, broken boy who'd somehow become the most important person in my world in just a few short weeks. "Look at me," I said softly. He opened his eyes, and even in the dim light from the window, I could see the fear there. Fear of rejection, of losing what we had, of having admitted too much. I reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. My fingers lingered against his skin, and he leaned into the touch like a cat seeking affection. "I think about you too," I admitted, "all the time, and it terrifies me." "Why?" he whispered. I tried to find the right words to explain the complexity of what I was feeling. "Because you're 18, and you've just been through something traumatic? Because I'm supposed to be helping you get back on your feet, not complicating things. Because if this goes wrong, you lose the only safe place you have right now. And I couldn't live with myself if I hurt you." My voice cracked on the last words, revealing more emotion than I'd intended. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing what I'd said. Then, he did something that surprised me. He reached out and took my hand, the one still near his face, and pressed it against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, rapid and strong under my palm. "I'm 18, not a child," he said with surprising firmness. "I've been through something traumatic, but I'm not broken. And yes, you've helped me, but this isn't gratitude, Caleb. This is me seeing you, all of you, and wanting to know you better, wanting to be close to you, wanting—" He trailed off, but his eyes said what his words didn't. We lay there, my hand on his chest, his hand covering mine. Neither of us willing to be the first to pull away. The moments stretched and expanded, filled with possibility and danger in equal measure. Finally, reluctantly, I withdrew my hand. "We should sleep," I said, though sleep was the last thing on my mind. Tyler nodded, disappointment flickering across his face before he hid it. "Yeah, okay." I stood to leave, and his hand shot out, catching my wrist. "Thank you. For staying. For listening." I squeezed his hand once before letting go. Always. January slid into February, and the ranch grew busier as we prepared for calving season. Tyler worked beside me every day, learning to assist with births, bottle feed rejected calves, and deal with the 100 small emergencies that came with new life. We fell into an easy partnership, anticipating each other's needs and movements like we'd been working together for years instead of weeks. But the tension between us grew too, building with every accidental touch, every lingering glance, every conversation that went deeper than it probably should. We didn't talk about that night in his room, but it changed things. There was an awareness now, an acknowledgement of feelings that hung in the air between us. I caught May watching us sometimes, a knowing look on her face, but she never said anything. Robert treated Tyler like the son he'd never had, teaching him the ins and outs of ranch management with patience and pride. Tyler bloomed under the attention, growing more confident and comfortable in his own skin. One particularly cold February night, we were called out to the barn around midnight. A heifer was having trouble delivering, and we needed to assist. It was delicate work, requiring patience and care. Tyler held the flashlight while I guided the calf into position, talking the heifer through it in a low, steady voice. After almost an hour, the calf finally slid free, and the heifer immediately began licking it clean. Tyler and I sat back on our heels, exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. "It never gets old," Tyler said, watching the calf struggle to its feet on wobbly legs. His face was lit with joy, and in that moment, covered in hay and birth fluids. He was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Without thinking, I reached out and tucked a piece of straw from his hair. My hand lingered against his cheek, and he leaned into the touch, his eyes falling closed. "Caleb," he breathed, and it sounded like a prayer and a plea all at once. I should have pulled away, should have stood up and focused on cleaning up and getting back to the cabin. Should have done anything except what I did, which was cup his face in both hands and leaned closer. Tyler's eyes flew open wide and dark and full of want. "Tell me to stop," I whispered, giving him one last chance to step back. Instead, he closed the distance between us, pressing his lips to mine in a kiss that felt like coming home and stepping into fire all at once. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of us scared of pushing too far too fast. But then Tyler made a small sound in the back of his throat, and something in me broke free. I pulled him closer, deepening the kiss, tasting him for the first time, and knowing I'd never get enough. His hands fisted in my jacket, pulling me against him, and we kissed like drowning men, gasping for air. Like people who'd been holding back for too long, and finally gave in. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Tyler's lips were swollen, his pupils blown wide, and he looked at me with such naked longing that it made my chest ache. "I've wanted to do that since Christmas," he admitted, his voice rough. I laughed shakily, resting my forehead against his. "I've wanted to do that since I found you crying behind the barn." We kissed again. Softer this time, savoring instead of desperate, and it felt like a promise of something more. We made our way back to the cabin in a daze, hands linked between us, stealing kisses in the darkness, like teenagers afraid of getting caught. Inside, we stood in the kitchen, suddenly awkward now that we'd crossed that line. "I should probably get some sleep," Tyler said, but he made no move toward his room. I pulled him close again, unable to resist, and kissed his forehead. His cheeks, the tip of his nose, everywhere except his lips, teasing him. He laughed and grabbed my face, directing my mouth back to his. "Stop being cute," he murmured against my lips. "I'm trying to be responsible here." "Since when are you responsible?" I teased, and he bit my lower lip gently in retaliation. We ended up on the couch, Tyler half in my lap, kissing until we were both shaking with want and need. But when his hands started to wander under my shirt, I caught his wrists gently. "Not yet," I said, my voice strained. "Not when we're both exhausted and running on adrenaline. You deserve better than a fumble on the couch because we're too worked up to think straight." Tyler looked frustrated but nodded reluctantly. "You're probably right. But I reserve the right to be impatient about it." I grinned and kissed him once more. Noted. The next morning, we woke up tangled together on the couch, fully clothed but wrapped around each other like neither of us could bear to let go even in sleep. Tyler stirred first, his eyes opening slowly and focusing on my face with a smile that made my heart stutter. "Morning," he mumbled, voice rough with sleep. "This is my new favorite way to wake up." I tightened my arms around him, pressing a kiss to his messy hair. "Mine too." The next few weeks were the happiest of my life. Tyler and I navigated this new territory between us with a mix of excitement and caution. We kept things quiet around May and Robert, not hiding exactly, but not announcing anything either. In private, we were inseparable. Tyler would sit between my legs while we watched movies, my arms wrapped around him from behind. We'd hold hands across the dinner table. We'd kiss in the barn when we thought no one was looking. Every touch felt like a revelation. We talked for hours every night, learning each other's histories and hopes. Tyler told me about growing up in a household where love was conditional, where every achievement came with the unspoken expectation of conformity. I told him about my own family, about parents who loved me but didn't understand why I'd chosen a life so different from theirs, about a younger sister who'd figured out my truth before I had and loved me anyway. We discovered we both loved old country music, terrible action movies, and the smell of coffee in the morning. Tyler was working hard on his GED, determined to finish by spring. He talked about maybe applying to college, maybe studying creative writing or veterinary science. Every time he spoke about the future, he included me in it naturally, like we were a given. When we ... double quotes, or after I graduate, we could ... My chest swelled with a feeling I was starting to recognize as love. Real, terrifying, all-consuming love. One evening in late February, I came back from checking the fence lines to find Tyler cooking dinner. He'd taken over that duty recently, discovering a talent for it that surprised both of us. The cabin smelled like garlic and herbs, and music played from his phone. He was swaying to the beat, completely unself-conscious, and I stood in the doorway just watching him. This beautiful boy who'd stumbled into my life had transformed it completely. I couldn't imagine going back to the solitary existence I'd had before. He turned and saw me, his face lighting up in that way that never failed to make me smile. "Hey, you're just in time. Dinner's almost ready." Crossed the room and stood on his toes to kiss me, something he'd gotten bolder about doing. I wrapped my arms around his waist, lifting him slightly off the ground, and he laughed against my mouth. "Show off," he accused, but his eyes were warm with affection. "Just demonstrating the benefits of ranch work," I teased back, setting him down gently. Over dinner, Tyler seemed nervous about something, fidgeting with his fork and not quite meeting my eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, concerned. He took a deep breath. "Nothing's wrong. I wanted to talk to you about something." My heart sank. Those words never preceded good news. "Okay," I said carefully. He finally looked up at me, and I was relieved to see no fear or sadness in his expression, just determination. "I've been thinking about my parents." I set down my fork, giving him my full attention. Tyler continued, "I'm not ready to forgive them. I might never be ready for that. But I think I need closure. I want to write them a letter, not because I expect anything back, but because I need to say what I didn't get to say before." He paused, watching for my reaction. "I think that's brave," I said honestly, "and probably healthy. Do you want help writing it?" He shook his head. "I need to do it myself. But would you read it before I send it?" "Just to make sure I'm not being crazy?" "You're not crazy," I said firmly. "And yes, I'll read it if you want me to." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you. For understanding. For not telling me I should just forgive them or try to reconcile. Some people don't deserve second chances." His voice was hard, but I saw the pain underneath. His parents' rejection had cut deep, and the scar was still raw. You deserved better than how they treated you, I said, squeezing his hand. You deserved parents who celebrated who you are instead of trying to change you. Tyler blinked back tears but smiled. I got lucky, though. I found May and Robert. And you. He paused, then added quietly, especially you. My throat tightened with emotion. I'm the lucky one, I managed. We finished dinner and cleaned up together, moving around each other with practiced ease. Later, curled up on the couch with Tyler's head on my chest, I felt a contentment so profound it scared me. This couldn't last, some part of my brain insisted. Good things never lasted, especially not for people like us. But Tyler tilted his head back to look at me, and the trust in his eyes silenced those doubts. What are you thinking about? He asked. I kissed his forehead. How happy I am, and how much that terrifies me. He shifted so he could see me better. Why does it terrify you? I struggled to articulate the fear. Because I've never had this before, never let myself want it. And now that I have it, the thought of losing it is... I couldn't finish the sentence. Tyler cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. You're not going to lose me, he said with conviction. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't gratitude or infatuation, or me trying to fill a void. This is real, Caleb. What I feel for you is real. I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. So I kissed him instead of voicing my fears, pouring everything I felt into that kiss. When we broke apart, Tyler whispered against my lips, I love you. The words hung in the air between us, huge and terrifying and wonderful. I'd never said those words to anyone romantically. Never let myself be vulnerable enough. But looking at Tyler, the boy who'd faced rejection and fear and the frozen Montana night and came out the other side stronger, I couldn't hold back. I love you too, I said, and watched his face transform with joy. We kissed again. Slower this time, savoring the moment, the declaration. The beginning of something neither of us had dared to hope for. March brought warmer weather and a crisis. Tyler's letter to his parents came back, returned to sender, which shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. We both knew they'd probably moved and not left a forwarding address, but the symbolism stung. Tyler spent a day being quiet and withdrawn before bouncing back with renewed determination. Fine, he said. They don't want to know how I'm doing? I'll show them by being successful and happy without them. Robert offered Tyler a permanent position with a real salary and benefits. Contingent on completing his GED, Tyler threw himself into his studies with fierce dedication. Often staying up late, hunched over his computer, I'd find him asleep at the kitchen table sometimes, his face pressed against his textbooks. I'd carry him to bed and he'd wake just enough to wrap his arms around my neck and murmur, "Love you." Those sleepy declarations never failed to make my chest ache with affection. But with the good came complications. One of the neighboring ranchers, Jim Peterson, stopped by one afternoon when Tyler and I were repairing a fence. We were working close together, Tyler handing me tools, our easy banter making the work pleasant. Jim watched us with narrow eyes, and something in his expression made my skin crawl. That the kid you folks took in over Christmas? He asked Robert, who'd come out to check our progress. Yep, Robert replied easily. Tyler's been a godsend around here. Hard worker. Jim grunted noncommittally. Seems mighty friendly with Caleb there. The comment hung in the air, loaded with implications. Robert's expression hardened slightly. Tyler and Caleb work well together. That's what matters on a ranch. Just making an observation. Some folks might talk, is all. It was a thinly veiled warning, and we all knew it. After Jim left, Robert pulled Tyler and me aside. Don't let him get to you. Small-minded people will always find something to gossip about, thought. But the encounter rattled me. I'd been so wrapped up in Tyler and what we were building, that I'd forgotten we weren't living in a vacuum. Montana ranch country wasn't exactly known for progressive attitudes. And while May and Robert accepted us, not everyone would. That night, I lay awake worrying. Tyler noticed my tension. "What's wrong?" he asked, propping himself up on one elbow to look at me. We'd been sleeping in the same bed for weeks now, finding comfort in closeness, even as we took our physical relationships slowly. "Jim Peterson," I said finally. "What he said today. It made me realize we might face problems." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Because we're gay?" he asked bluntly. I nodded. "Because we're gay and not hiding it very well." Tyler traced patterns on my chest absently. "Are you ashamed of me? Of us?" The question was soft, but I heard the hurt underneath. "No," I said immediately, pulling him close. "Never. I'm just scared. For you, mostly. You've already been hurt so much and you haven't," Tyler challenged. "You've been hiding who you are for years, Caleb. Isn't that its own kind of hurt?" He was right, and I knew it. "I just don't want to make your life harder," I admitted. Tyler kissed me softly. "You make my life better. Infinitely better. And if people have a problem with that, that's their issue, not ours." His conviction was admirable, but I worried it came from naivety. He hadn't lived in a small, conservative community long enough to understand how isolation could feel. A few days later, my fears proved justified. Tyler came back from town with groceries looking shaken. "What happened?" I asked immediately. He set down the bags with trembling hands. "I ran into Jim Peterson at the feed store. He said some things. Called me a..." He couldn't finish the sentence, but I could guess. Rage flooded through me, hot and immediate. "Did he touch you?" I demanded. Tyler shook his head. "No, just words." But Caleb, the look on his face, it was the same look my father had. Like I was disgusting. Like I shouldn't exist. I pulled him into my arms, feeling him shake against me. "I'm sorry," I murmured into his hair. "I'm so sorry." He pulled back, and I was surprised to see anger in his eyes rather than fear. "Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything wrong?" "He did. People like him did." He was right. But that didn't make me feel any less guilty for bringing him into a situation where he'd face that kind of hatred again. "Maybe we should be more careful," I suggested. "Keep things quieter." Tyler's expression hardened. "No, I spent 18 years hiding Caleb, pretending to be someone I wasn't to make other people comfortable. I'm not doing that anymore." He softened slightly, seeing my worry. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I'd rather face the world as myself with you beside me than hide and be safe but miserable. Wouldn't you?" I thought about all the years I'd kept my truth buried, the loneliness of that existence, and compared it to the happiness I'd found with Tyler. I admitted. "I would." "Then we face this together," Tyler said firmly. "Whatever comes." I kissed him, gentle and reverent, in awe of his courage. This boy who'd been broken and betrayed had somehow emerged stronger, refusing to let hate win. He made me want to be braver, to stop hiding, to live authentically, even if it was harder. That night, I held him close and made a silent promise. Whatever challenges came, we'd face them together. I wouldn't let fear control me anymore. Not everyone in the community reacted like Jim Peterson. The following Sunday, May invited us to join them for church, something she'd never pushed before. Tyler and I exchanged uncertain glances. "We don't have to go," May said gently. "But there are good people there who should know you both." "Who might surprise you?" Robert nodded. "Not everyone's small-minded. Some folks just need a chance to see past their assumptions." We agreed to go. Though I felt like I was walking into a den of lions, The service was in a small white church that had stood on the edge of town for over 100 years. People stared as we entered, and I felt Tyler tense beside me. But May led us to her usual pew, with her head held high, and Robert's solid presence behind us felt protective. The pastor, a woman in her 50s named Sarah Chen, surprised me by being warm and welcoming. "So good to see you all," she said, shaking our hands. "Tyler, welcome. I've heard wonderful things about how hard you've been working." The service itself was traditional, nothing surprising. But the sermon was about love and acceptance, and seeing the divine in all people. Pastor Sarah spoke about Jesus' message of inclusion and caring for the marginalized. Several times her eyes found Tyler and me, not with judgment, but with kindness. After the service, a few people made a point of introducing themselves to Tyler. It's asking about his work on the ranch. It's treating him like a person rather than an oddity. An older woman named Dorothy pulled me aside. "That young man of yours seems lovely," she said, and my heart stopped. Before I could formulate a response, she patted my arm. "My grandson is gay. Lives in Seattle now because he didn't feel safe here. I've always regretted that we weren't brave enough to make this place somewhere he could be himself." She looked at Tyler, who was laughing at something May was saying. "You hold on to that one. And don't let the Jim Petersons of the world make you hide." I was speechless. Dorothy smiled and walked away, leaving me reeling. Tyler appeared at my elbow. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I grabbed his hand right there in the church parking lot, not caring who saw. "I'm better than okay," I said. On the drive home, May explained that she'd been talking to people, quietly making it known that Tyler and I were together and that anyone who had a problem with it would have a problem with her. "You didn't have to do that," Tyler said, clearly emotional. "Yes, I did," May replied firmly. "You're family now. Both of you. And we protect family." Robert reached over and squeezed her hand. "Besides," he added with a slight smile, "anyone who knows Caleb knows he's been walking around with his head in the clouds for weeks. Wasn't hard to figure out why." I felt my face heat, but Tyler laughed, squeezing my hand. The acceptance from May and Robert, from Pastor Sarah and Dorothy and others in the community, felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. Over the following weeks, we discovered that the community wasn't monolithic. Yes, there were people like Jim Peterson who disapproved, or worse. But there were also people who surprised us with their acceptance. The owner of the diner in town, Maria, started giving us free coffee. The local mechanic, Tom, helped Tyler fix up an old truck Robert was selling him at cost. These small kindnesses mattered more than I could express. They made our small corner of Montana feel less like enemy territory and more like home. Tyler took his GED exam in early April and passed with flying colors. May and Robert threw him a small party, inviting neighbors and ranch hands. Watching Tyler surrounded by people celebrating his achievement, his face lit with genuine happiness, I felt overwhelmed with pride and love. This was the future he deserved. One filled with support and opportunity and people who valued him. He caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "I love you." I mouthed it back, not caring who saw. Later that night, back at the cabin, Tyler was buzzing with excitement. "I did it," he kept saying. "I actually did it," pulled him into a hug. "You did. I'm so proud of you." He pulled back to look at me, his expression serious despite the joy still dancing in his eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you. You know that, right? You saved my life that night, in more ways than one." I cupped his face in my hands. "You saved mine, too. I just didn't know I needed saving until you showed up." We kissed, and it quickly deepened, charged with celebration and relief and desire. Tyler's hand slipped under my shirt, and this time when I started to pull back, he stopped me. "Don't," he said. "I'm ready. I want this. I want you." His eyes were dark with want, and I felt my resolve crumbling. Are you sure? I asked, needing to hear it clearly. I've never been more sure of anything, Tyler replied. So I carried him to our bedroom, and we took our time discovering each other, learning what made the other gasp and sigh and forget everything but the moment. Summer arrived, bringing long days and hard work. Tyler had been accepted to the State University's online program starting in the fall. He's planning to study agricultural business management. Might as well learn about what I'm already doing, he'd said with a grin. He'd also started writing seriously, filling notebooks with poetry and short stories. Sometimes he'd read them to me, and I'd be struck by the raw honesty and beauty in his words. He had a gift, and I encouraged him to submit his work to literary magazines. One evening in late July, Tyler and I rode out to a hilltop on the property where you could see for miles. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. Can I tell you something? Tyler asked eventually. I pulled him closer, his back against my chest. Always. He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I used to think about dying before I met you. Not constantly, but enough that it scared me. I couldn't see a future where I got to be happy and myself at the same time. My arms tightened around him reflexively. The thought of a world without Tyler in it was unbearable. And now? I asked, my voice rough with emotion. He turned in my arms to face me, his expression open and vulnerable. Now I think about living, about all the things I want to do and see and experience, about the life we're building together, about maybe getting married someday when it doesn't seem so impossible, about being old together and sitting on a porch watching sunsets like this one. Tears stung my eyes. I want all of that, I said. Every bit of it. Tyler smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Good, because you're stuck with me now. We kissed as the last light faded from the sky, and I felt a certainty settle in my chest. This was real. This was forever. This was the life I'd been too scared to hope for. Handed to me by a boy crying in the snow on Christmas Eve. We stayed on that hill until the stars came out. Talking about dreams and plans and the future we'd face together. When we finally rode back to the cabin, May was waiting on the porch with a smile. There's someone on the phone for Tyler, she said. A woman from a literary magazine called Prairie Voices. Tyler's eyes went wide. He'd submitted a poem months ago and hadn't heard back. He dismounted quickly and took the phone, wandering a few feet away for privacy. I watched him pace, his free hand gesturing as he talked, and saw the moment he got good news. His face lit up, and he jumped slightly, barely containing his excitement. When he hung up, he ran to me. They want to publish my poem, and they want to see more of my work. I picked him up and spun him around, both of us laughing like idiots. May and Robert came out to see what the commotion was about, and when Tyler told them, May actually cried. I'm so proud of you, she said, pulling him into a hug. That night, Tyler couldn't stop smiling. Everything's falling into place, he said wonderingly. I have a home, people who love me, school starting in the fall, and now this. It feels too good to be true. It's not too good to be true, I assured him. It's exactly what you deserve. He kissed me softly. We deserve, he corrected. This is ours, not just mine. He was right. We'd built this together, out of pain and fear and hope. We'd taken the worst moments of our lives and turned them into something beautiful. That night, lying in bed with Tyler's head on my chest, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that frozen Christmas Eve to this warm summer night, from loneliness to love, from hiding to living openly. Hey, Caleb, Tyler murmured sleepily. Yeah. He pressed a kiss over my heart. Thank you for finding me that night. For not walking past the barn. For saving me. I stroked his hair gently. Thank you for letting me. for trusting me, for teaching me it's okay to be seen. He made a contented sound and burrowed closer. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into sleep. I lay awake a while longer, watching the moonlight paint silver across his face, and thought about how one moment can change everything. If I hadn't checked the barn that night, if Tyler hadn't sought shelter there, if either of us had been too scared to take a chance on connection, we'd both still be lost in our own ways. But we'd found each other, and in doing so, we'd found ourselves. The boy crying behind the barn had become the man sleeping peacefully in my arms, and the lonely cowboy had become someone who believed in love. Not the easy, simple kind you see in movies, but the real, complicated, beautiful kind that requires courage and honesty and choosing each other every single day. Epilogue. 1 year. Later, Christmas Eve arrived again, bringing with it memories of that night 1 year ago. Tyler stood at the kitchen window, watching snow fall softly outside, lost in thought. I came up behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist and resting my chin on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. He leaned back into me. "Just remembering last year. How different everything is now." He turned in my arms, his expression soft. "I was so scared that night. I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was actually just beginning." I kissed him gently. "Best Christmas present I ever got, finding you behind that barn." He laughed. "I was not a present. I was a disaster." I grinned. "My disaster, though." He rolled his eyes but smiled. "Your disaster," he agreed. We'd come so far in a year. Tyler was thriving in his online classes, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working full-time on the ranch. He'd had 3 more poems published and was working on a collection. We'd faced prejudice and pushback, but we'd also found community and acceptance in unexpected places. May called from the living room that dinner was ready. The house was full of people, Robert and May, some ranch hands who'd become friends, Pastor Sarah and her wife, Dorothy, and her husband, and even Tyler's younger sister, Emma, who'd reached out over the summer and slowly rebuilt a relationship with her brother. She'd flown in from college for the holiday, bringing with her hope that maybe, someday, healing was possible even with family who'd hurt you. Not all families, maybe, but some. As we gathered around the table, hands joined for grace. I looked at the faces of people who'd become our chosen family. This was what love looked like. Not just the romantic kind between Tyler and me, though that was there too, stronger than ever, but the bigger kind, the kind that showed up in support and acceptance and the choice to see people for who they really were. Pastor Sarah's wife squeezed my hand during the prayer, and I squeezed back. Grateful beyond words. After dinner, Tyler and I slipped away to the barn. It had become a tradition, coming out here on Christmas Eve to remember and be grateful. We stood in the exact spot where I'd found him a year ago, and the contrast couldn't have been starker. Then broken, frozen, terrified. Now whole, warm, loved. "I wrote something," Tyler said, pulling out his phone. "A poem about that night and this year and us. Want to hear it?" I nodded, and he read to me in the soft light of the barn. His words painted pictures of darkness and light, of fear transforming into hope, of love found in unexpected places. When he finished, my eyes were wet. "That's beautiful," I managed. "You're beautiful." He tucked his phone away and stepped into my arms. "We're beautiful," he corrected, "together." We kissed, unhurried and deep, tasting of May's apple pie and coffee and home. When we broke apart, Tyler smiled up at me. "So, Caleb Morrison, what do you think this next year will bring?" I considered the question seriously. More hard work, more challenges, probably some difficult days. His smile didn't falter. And I grinned. and more joy than we know what to do with. More growth. More of us figuring out this life together. He nodded, satisfied. I can live with that. We stood there a while longer, wrapped in each other, and in gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought us together. Then we went back to the house, to the warmth and laughter and family we'd chosen, and who'd chosen us. Later that night, back in our cabin, Tyler gave me a present. Inside the small box was a leather bracelet with a simple compass charm. So you never lose your way, he said softly. I fastened it around my wrist, then pulled out my own gift for him. A journal, leather-bound and beautiful, with his initials embossed on the cover. For all the stories you're going to write, I explained. He ran his fingers over the cover reverently. I love it. I love you. Those words still made my heart skip. I love you too. More than I thought I could love anyone. We lay in bed that night, the lights off except for the soft glow of the Christmas tree visible through our window. Tyler traced patterns on my chest absently, something he did when he was thinking. Next year, he said quietly, I want to make it official. Us. Maybe get married. Maybe just a commitment ceremony if marriage isn't legal yet where we are. But something that tells the world you're mine and I'm yours. My breath caught. Yeah. He propped himself up to look at me. Yeah. If you want that too. I want that more than anything, I admitted. We kissed, sealing the promise, and I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was my future. Not alone in a cabin, hiding from connection. But here with Tyler, building something real and lasting and true. We'd face whatever came together, the challenges, the joys, the ordinary moments that made up a life. And I couldn't wait. Outside, snow continued to fall softly, covering the world in clean white. It's like a reset button for the universe. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright. Tyler woke me with kisses, his cold nose pressing against my neck and making me yelp. He laughed, unrepentant. Merry Christmas, he said. I pulled him down for a proper kiss. Merry Christmas, love. We got dressed and headed to the main house, where May had prepared enough food to feed an army. The day passed in a blur of good food, laughter, presents, and the warm feeling of being exactly where we were supposed to be. As the sun set on another Christmas, Tyler and I stood on the porch, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Thank you, he said quietly. I looked at him questioningly. For what? He gestured broadly at everything. The ranch, the house, the mountains in the distance, us. For this, for giving me a reason to keep going that night. For showing me that life could be good, that love was real, that I deserved to be happy. Pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. You gave me all of that too. We saved each other, he nodded against my chest. Yeah, we did. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, I thought about how much could change in a year. How quickly everything could transform from despair to hope, from loneliness to love. All it had taken was one frozen night, one crying boy, one decision to help instead of walking past. The smallest choices could have the biggest impacts. I was grateful every day for that choice, for Tyler, for the life we were building. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next, challenges, triumphs, ordinary days, and extraordinary moments, we'd face it together. The cowboy and the boy from behind the barn. Two lost souls who'd found each other, and in doing so, found home. And that, I thought as Tyler snuggled closer against the cold, was the best Christmas miracle of all. Not the dramatic kind from movies, but the real kind. The kind that started with compassion and grew into love. The kind that changed everything. The kind that lasted. From a cowboy finding a crying teen behind a barn on Christmas Eve to building a life filled with love and acceptance, Caleb and Tyler proved that sometimes the darkest nights lead to the brightest mornings. But their story doesn't end here. Want part 2? Comment part 2 below. Like this video and subscribe so you never miss their next chapter. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love always wins. See you soon. And that's how Caleb and Tyler's journey began on that frozen Christmas Eve. But this was only the beginning. If you want to know what happened next year, how they made their commitment official, and how their lives took a beautiful new turn, then let me know in the comments. Because Tyler and Caleb's story isn't over yet. This was just the first chapter. If you want to see part 2, where you'll witness Tyler and Caleb's wedding preparations, the new challenges in their relationship, and how they achieve their dreams together, then please hit that Like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss part 2. And yes, if this story touched your heart, please share it with your friends. Because these true stories of love deserve to be heard by everyone. Let me know in the comments which part of this story was your favorite. And if you want to see part 2, write part 2 in the comments. See you in the next story. Until then, stay blessed and stay true to yourself. Take care.